about accessibility and making a React app a bit nicer. So I know last week was very much focused on accessibility and general accessibility principles. This one is actually going through like an example of things you can do in a React app to help improve the accessibility of it. So we have this pretty simple React app. I will just run yarn start so that we can see. I've already run yarn to install the dependencies. As we saw, sometimes it can take a bit of time. So this is, yeah, this is pretty much what we're working with. You can put in a name, submit it. Let's see. Not the prettiest, but I guess it does work. But yeah, so we're just going to go through it and see some of the changes that we can make to clean it up. So as a first step, I would probably run it through Lighthouse, which we went through last week, which is just an automated auditor for accessibility. And this can give you some hints on like what might not be so good about your website and things to fix up. But it, as we will see, it does not account for everything. So we can see if there are any issues that it picks up, first of all. Okay, 89 for accessibility. What does it say? Form elements do not have associated labels. Okay, I think that's the only one that it could come up with. This is a pretty simple web page, so I feel like a lot of them wouldn't be applicable. But here, I'm pretty sure it's referring to this, which is the only form element without a label. And if we look at our code, we can see we have, where is the form? Oh yeah, first name, input. So we just have an input tag, input tag, but no label tag. And a label tag is like very helpful because although here as like a normal user, you can see that these two are kind of associated with each other, like first name is referring to this input box. A label tag like will programmatically associate the first name with that input box. So if you're using a screen reader, it'll know what like text to read out when you're focused on this box. So it goes a step further than just like visually putting them near each other, but it helps assistive technology figure out what to read when you're focused on certain inputs. So there are two ways you can actually do this. One way is you can wrap the input tag. You can nest the input tag within the label, which will then associate the two. Or you can not nest it and you can just have like label and then use the for attribute on it. If I think the for attribute, it's either the name or ID that it refers to, but so if I had like ID equals first name, and then if I had for here, first name, then it wouldn't need to be nested inside it, and that would also still work. But let's see if we run it again, whether this will fix our problem. So it still looks the same pretty much now. It's just, hopefully now this will fix that issue. Yep. Okay. So yeah, generally with like any input tags, make sure you have a label associated with them. Some other things that Lighthouse cannot pick up on though is going back to like the first couple of weeks of this course, how we discussed a lot about semantic HTML, which is essentially just if we look here, everything is pretty much a div, which isn't ideal. Like if you can give your HTML tags some meaning, it's probably better to do so. And actually, whoever created this exercise, Hayden, has been pretty nice by giving us like class names that kind of indicate what they should be. So for example, this is kind of like, yeah, the header of the page. So rather than just making it a generic div, we can make this a header. There's actually a nav tag as well in HTML. So this whole nav bar could be a nav element rather than, oh no, I don't want bottom navigation, just nav. Then generally, a lot of navigation like sections are actually done using an unordered list. So we could do something like wrap these divs in an unordered list. And then all of these become list items. So it's not really changing anything visually, but it gives the page a lot more meaning for like screen readers and things like that to help figure out where they are on a page. Like a header is a lot more informative than just being like, I'm in a div. So that's probably why you would want to use them over just divs everywhere. This, like there's a main HTML tag as well, which just pretty much means it's the main content within the body, which this section is. So we can change it to main here. We fixed this label issue. As a side note, I don't really think this, I don't know if it's an accessibility problem, but generally in assignments, I know like there was some marks lost if people use BR tags rather than like, I think generally it's preferred to style like any BR tags. Like if you want to break in text, style it using CSS rather than just like injecting multiple BR tags to give your page like spacing. As like a side note, I don't think that's super related to accessibility, but just more for like good code style. We have, what is this? This is mapping the names. So I would probably do something with the names again. So wrap them in an unordered list. And then make them all a list item and then get rid of this inline styling. I don't think that's was really doing anything. So if I go and like that's a bit easier to read. This submit button, something also to be aware of, is for like more usability. If something's clickable, like this submit button, you don't want it to be like this kind of cursor on hover. You would rather it to be like an arrow to indicate to the user that it's clickable. So rather than using a div, probably use something like a button. And so now it's a lot more visually indicative that you can press this and it will do something than it was previously. And then finally, we have got a footer here. So this is something that, yeah, things like Lighthouse won't pick up, but it is good practice to try and use more than just divs, even though, yeah, it can be kind of easy. Why? Oh, okay. I accidentally imported it, but yes. Okay, let me think. Oh, okay. There is like one other thing that is an important consideration for accessibility that we briefly touched on last week, but generally to make a page like hit the correct accessibility standards, you want to be able to navigate it using your keyboard only. So that means I can like tab through all the various links on this page. But as you can see, I'm pressing the tab button now. It's completely missing this top section, which is like supposed to be a navigation bar. It technically they go nowhere now, but that is its intended purpose. But since I've like just made them like list elements, tab isn't going to pick up on them. So we can add this HTML attribute to, I'm pretty sure, like any element called tab index. And then, so you give it an integer value. I think in most cases you would give it an integer value of 0, which 0 just means that it will be, so if I check this page now, oh wait, let me, hopefully, I haven't saved it. Okay. Tab, okay, now you can see home is focused when I'm tabbing through this page. So 0 just means that the element will be focused when you navigate with the tab key. A negative number, if you assign a negative number, I think it means you can programmatically focus it via JavaScript. And a positive number, well, I'll show you if I add a tab index to all of these and then make pricing 1 or something, it means pricing will like now be it's like manually setting the order. So now pricing's getting tabbed first, which is like a bit confusing, and then it'll go do all the 0 elements. So most of the time I feel like you can just leave it at 0 because it'll do it sequentially then, unless you very specifically want a manual ordering, then you can use positive indexes here. But this essentially just means that now when I tab through the page, I'm going through all the top nav bar as well as my input and button elements. Okay, so I think that is that, well, it actually looks exactly the same, but I think the page is like quite a bit more accessible than it was previously. Does anyone have any questions on any of those changes? Okay, so if not, there's a part 2 for this exercise, setting up ESLint. So I have already run yarn add ESLint config react app. We can check that it is in my package.json here. Does anyone know what this dev flag means? Because, for example, previous exercise when we added react router DOM, it was just yarn add react router DOM. But here we have this -- dev flag. So if we look at our package.json, oh wait, is it? Let's see. Oh, that's quite weird. Okay, well, maybe I didn't run it with the -- dev flag, but I might have just added yarn add ESLint config react app, but this -- dev flag means that it will just be put in your dev dependencies rather than your dependencies. What's the difference between dev dependencies and just dependencies? So I guess the naming isn't too far off, but a dependency is essentially just a library that your project will need to function effectively in production. So something like React Router DOM is actually used when the app is like working, whereas a dev dependency is any packages for a developer during the development phase, but it's not really essential for production. So for example, ESLint is just like linting your project. So it doesn't need to be in production. It's just linting your code. Testing is like any testing libraries you use are generally in your dev dependencies because they just work for developers. They don't really need to be sent off when the app is in production. So those are the like slight differences. And so if you ever see a -- dev flag, it's just saying that you want it to be in your dev dependencies, not your dependencies. Anyway, but yes, that was a slight aside. Yes, you could just comment out the ESLint file. Actually, speaking of ESLint stuff. So I've seen, yeah, there are been quite a lot of posts on the forum about like ESLint being kind of annoying. I'm not sure if this will 100% work, but I remember, I think I did this when I did the assignment, but you can download this install this ESLint extension for VS Code that can help maybe auto format your code according to the ESLint config file. I'll tuck this link in the chat if anyone's interested. Because I think this article goes through it a lot better than I could probably explain it. It's pretty straightforward, though. No, I haven't used it in a couple of months, so apologies if it doesn't work, but that's something you could do, or you could, yeah, comment out. You can add like, you can comment, like you can add these ESLint comments to basically disable ESLint for an entire file, or yeah, modify the ESLint file to stop giving you errors while you're developing, because it can be kind of annoying if you just want to see if something compiles. So yes, just make sure before you submit the assignment, if you want that 5%, that it's works with the provided config file. But yeah, I couldn't, so hopefully that extension can help you auto format some of like the things from the config file, if that's something you would find helpful. But yeah, with this one, this isn't a super long file. We can just run, so with ESLint added, we can then run yarn ESLint in the directory, and I'm going to full size it so that we can see. So it came up with one problem. Logo is defined but never used, pretty much. So no unused variables is a rule that it was violating. So if I delete this, run it again. Okay, hopefully, okay, it's done, no issues. So hopefully that should be ESLint compliant now. Yeah, I think that looks okay, but that wasn't a super, yeah, I guess there wasn't too much going on in this file, but, and I don't think the ESLint rules on this file are as strict as they are for your assignment 3. So yeah, that was all good. Now, part 3 is to use something, a React-based library, Material UI. So first I'm going to, actually, I think they might be added, but just in case. So in this case, I'm using yarn add no -- dev because Material UI is needed in like the production version of the code. So that is why it just gets added to the normal dependencies. And essentially this is just going through how we can use Material UI in something like React. So I think it is installed now. Close that to give us some room, and add at least 2 Material UI components to your React app. They can be anything. Okay, so I feel like the easiest thing to add, unless anyone has suggestions on a particular Material UI component, but I would say also documentation for Material UI is very good. And I'm pretty sure Hayden has said in the forum that you can basically take code from any of the examples you find on Material UI or any like component libraries. So if we do just like a simple example of like the button, now that Material UI is installed in our dependencies, we can just steal this import here to import the button, and then change our button to be a capitalized button. And let's say I want the outlined variant. So I'm just going to take this class, this attribute, and put it here. Okay, now it looks a lot, well, I guess nicer, has a hover effect. So a super simple way to do buttons, make it fancier. Yeah. I would say, yeah, any material UI. Oh, I did not mean to do that. Any material UI, like using a component library, I think can automatically like elevate your app and make it a lot fancier than kind of just plain HTML. So it is like and yeah, I think it does help with just making your page look a bit more usable and nicer. There isn't too much like we can do with a button, but one thing that might be interesting to look at as well is for this import field, we can also try and see a material UI component. So if we come look at the components available, I can't find, so import text field. I think that's what we want. Yeah, if we want something like this for I just want a basic text field, I think. So I'm just gonna see the entire code, take this import, and then take, let's say the outlined one looks the nicest. Take this entire line and comment this out. So text field ID equals first name, label, first name, variant outline. Okay. Has that done anything? Okay, it has done something. So yeah, you've got this like animation that you didn't need to code yourself by using a component library. Interestingly though, if we check the accessibility for this, like here we haven't got a label explicitly, and like this text field seems to kind of be combining the label and input tags into one. So I'm curious to see whether Lighthouse will say it's fine. Because yeah, now we don't have like an explicit label tag. Okay, so apparently this is fine for a screen reader. It knows that there is like what the associated label is for this. And something that is quite helpful with like a big library like Material UI is if you I don't know if all the components have this, but if you scroll to the bottom of them, a lot of them have an accessibility section. So this is the issue that we ran into before. For the text field to be accessible, the input should be linked to the label and the helper text. So this is the underlying structure that the DOM nodes need to have. In this case, they use the for attribute rather than doing the nesting. But here it says, if you are using the text field component, you just have to provide a unique ID unless you're using the text field only client side. But essentially, I think the main point is for this text field component, Material UI will handle all the accessibility needs as long as you just provide a unique ID. So make sure that if you do use these components, definitely check out this section just to make sure you're using the components in an accessible way. But a lot of times these libraries will try and make it as simple as possible for you to get it working. Like more simple than kind of doing the underlying HTML DOM stuff. Okay. Any questions on any of those parts?